It's 6:30 p.m. Today is Tuesday, September 3rd, 2019, and this is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Marquette Township Board. If you'd join us in the pledge, I'd appreciate it.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, Randy, please.
Trustee LaRue.
Here.
Trustee Marks.
Present.
Trustee Everson.
Here.
Trustee Wiegand.
Here.
Treasurer Johnson.
Here.
Clerk Rattari is here, and Supervisor Duran.
Here.
Staff present is Attorney Zappa, and Planning Zoning Administrator McCarthy is here. And actually, Jason, sit up here. We got a spot for you since the manager is gone.
Oh, sure. Good idea.
And no committee members present.
Okay. Public comment. Does anybody wish to address the board? Name and address, please.
Yes, please. My name is Peter Zenti from 2002 Werner, just down the block, and thank you for serving our community. If I could approach the board, I have a plat map that I wonder if you might pass down.
Sure.
To look at the topography of the intersections of Granite Avenue and Deer Wright Street. I want to thank Mr. McCarthy for giving me some advice on how to approach this, being here tonight for public comment. I'm talking about, this is my home off of Werner Street. I would like to place solar array there. Unfortunately, my home is down along the Badger Creek Valley, and so my whole south or sun exposure is on a ridge. However, if you come over this ridge down in here, Peninsula Solar, who came out to my property a couple times, said that is the best place because we have a pond right here, so there's no trees, so that would be the best place for solar. Unfortunately, that's right on the intersection of Granite Avenue and Deer Wright Street. Kind of an odd thing happened when I bought the property about 9 years ago. It was actually printed on a plat map that I'm passing around to you, not that one, but it was printed that those streets were vacated. Apparently they're not. And so when I first started talking with Mr. McCarthy, I didn't have much knowledge about the materials, and so I talked about vacating or abandoning the streets. That's a lengthy process. And so at my tender age, I'm not buying any green bananas or big tubes of toothpaste. I like to do something more simple, if it would be agreeable to the board. My friend and bandmate, Dave Stensis, a city planner from Marquette, suggested that if the township can grant me a license to use the property, so that's my first request or consideration, that would be the best case scenario, as it is a fairly simple legal agreement. An easement would be the next easiest option, but that is a real estate transaction where the township must have a deed prepared and approve the easement by resolution. So I'm not even going to go there about asking you to vacate the property or abandonment. However, if you follow my driveway that goes in right here, it's not as big as the rock cut by the prison, but it's a big rock cliff. I would invite anybody that wants to come in my driveway and take a look at that intersection. It would be very expensive to ever put Granite Avenue going through here, because you'd be going over this big cliff here, and then there's about a 50-foot cliff right along the edge of the creek there. Deer Wright comes along here. When I talked to I think it was your intern that was working with you, I'm sorry, I forget his name, about 2 months ago, he said, well, the streets haven't been abandoned because you might want to have a pathway through there or something, or a trail. I'm a trail builder in town here with the NTN, and I can tell you that we do not build trails on anything more than a 10% slope. And that slope going along Granite Street would be a 45 or 50% slope. Impossible to have a trail without moving quite a bit of rock. So I don't want to extend my 3 minutes, but that's my request for you to consider if you might grant me a license to use the property. And I'd be more than happy if you grant me the license and you say, hey, if we're ever going to put a road in there, you're going to have to tear this down. But it's been platted for over 100 years and no road's gone in yet. And because of the very steep rock cliffs here and here, I'm not a city planner, but I don't know if anybody ever put a road in there. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Zenti. So is there any comment on what we just heard? This is kind of our time. We don't have a lot of information, Jason.
Yeah, just some points of clarification. The city owns their right-of-ways, the township does not. The road commission owns the right-of-ways. So it's not quite as simple as Planner Stenzis alluded to. However, the board has historically had a position of reserving the rights and to develop their right-of-ways. Any deviation from that would have to come from the board. As I explained to you tonight, that they probably won't have much interaction with you, and rather they would bring this up at a future meeting or direct staff to go in the direction that they so choose. But I suspect I'll be in touch with you at some point soon.
Okay, and thank you very much, and if you ever want to drive out there just to see the reality of the severity of the terrain, you're more than welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, appreciate it. Has planning seen this or had talked about this at all?
No, we've had a couple discussions on the phone. Scheduling conflicts kind of prevented me from going out there and looking at it, but I did bring it up to the manager, and he indicated that it would have to be a board action to take any measures. Even if you went through an abandonment process, or even what he suggested, an easement or a license would have to come from the road commission, provided that the township board supports that.
So we could put this on the next agenda and get some more information and recommendations and a
Sure.
possible motion or
Sure.
legal action or whatever.
Absolutely.
Something that should go through the planning commission?
Yeah, that's what I asked, that they
Probably should go
haven't
to the,
seen it at all. Well, we'd still have to direct them or not?
Well, it's a policy decision more than it is, a use permit. I mean, if the township elects to allow him to utilize the right-of-way and the road commission agrees with it, then he still has to go through the special use process to locate and site his solar, residential solar panels.
Okay.
Don't you think the planning commission should take a look at it?
If
Before-
you'd like him to,
You know,
sure.
I mean, that's where we're gonna get more information.
Well, do you have any actions that you can take without us giving you direction to do this or not?
No, it would take board action to change the policy that you've had of not abandoning, it's in the master plan, it's in the road facilities plan or the transportation plan that the board would have to act.
So if we can get one of your narratives next meeting, maybe, with an explanation of what he's looking for, what it entails, what it costs, what we have to get from legal, then we can, it sounds like he doesn't have any kind of a deadline or time frame other than maybe before it snows.
Right, I just simply told him that I did not have the power, nor did the planning commission, to allow him to do it.
Dave?
If you guys recall when we abandoned the Erie Street right away, that was a 2-year process?
Yeah, in a plat, yes, because you have to,
And isn't this part of the same plat? Yeah.
a different portion of it, but
It's a
yes.
long, drawn-out process, so.
Yeah, the easy button may be for the road commission to allow it, and then the township board to support it.
Any questions? John?
So I'm wondering, you want that to be in the reverse order? You want it to be first from the county?
Well,
Wouldn't be a bad idea.
correct.
Okay. Before the township board takes action, why don't we have the planner present or the case that's been provided to us to the county and let them look at it and tell us, or tell them, but tell us at the same time, what they think about this. Then we can get into the dilemma of what we should do and who we should send it to. That'd be the second step. I believe it belongs with the county first. In our interest, it belongs to the county first.
Would they look at it before we do? If
I would
they-
imagine, yeah, I
Okay.
would imagine they would appreciate that. So, yeah, that's fine. I'll, if there's a consensus, I'll contact the road commission and figure it out and then bring back my findings to the next
That
meeting.
sound all right?
All right.
Go to the road commission.
And if there are any future plans for those abandoned roads, that yes, no, or something.
Okay.
I doubt it, but
And then I'll put it on the next agenda, and if that isn't ready or whatever, just let me know.
I'll have it ready for you.
Okay.
What's Mr. Zenti's address?
Peter, on, Warner
2000
Street?
2002 Warner Street.
Okay, so, road commission. Okay, put that on the 17th. Okay, so we did our comment in relation to public comment. Reg texted me and said he wanted to hear your presentation, so do you want to reserve time to speak in case he, okay, that's what I just wanted to know before we did the agenda. Okay. Consent agenda. Tonight consists of approval of the regular meeting minutes of August 20th, 2019. Bills payable in the amount of $132,612.33. Committee reports and other reports, road committee agenda for September 3rd, the utility bill calendar for September, correspondence regarding no board action. Gee, nothing from charter this time. State of Michigan notice of hearing for Semco Energy case U-20431. State of Michigan notice of hearing for State Revolving Fund Strategic Water Quality Initiatives Fund. Anything that needs to be pulled out of the consent agenda? Otherwise, I need approval.
I'll make a motion, we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any conflicts of interest with the agenda that we have? I don't hear any.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next up, Board Education Privilege Comment. We have a presentation from Zoning Administrator Jason McCarthy regarding 2020-2021 potential US 41 highway enhancement, safe routes to school projects. Could have had a shorter title.
Your pointer's up
Oh,
there.
okay, thanks.
It should be ready to go.
So, thank you. Recently, we've been contacted by the Safe Routes to School program. With the success that we had in the 2015-2016 construction of our project, they reached out to us to see if we had any new projects that we might be interested in working with the school and Safe Routes to School on. So immediately my wheels started turning and I thought of a project that we might be able to piggyback onto the 2021 MDOT project, which will be east of the highway intersection and or east of the Target Walmart intersection all the way out to Front Street in a road resurfacing project. But again, we've been talking about the Township Business Association and identifying, these things that we want to improve, such as lighting, pedestrian access, better access to the businesses, safer access to the businesses along that stretch, and aesthetic improvements to the corridor itself. So just wanted to obviously relate the importance of long-range planning. Fortunately, these types of things are found in our master plan as well as our recreation and transportation plans. And a little background on non-motorized. In 2011, we instituted a complete streets policy. And also in 2011, we adopted smart growth initiatives into our master plan, But most importantly, in 2012, we adopted a complete streets ordinance, and we were the first township in Michigan to do so. So here's essentially what a complete street looks like. It's not just for the motor vehicle, but we have spaces within that public space for all ages and abilities. We worked with North Star Academy, of course, in 2015-16, and we were successful with a federal Safe Routes to School grant, which is actually a component of MDOT's Transportation Alternatives Program grant, which is the same grant program that we were successful with the tunnel application for. So we were awarded almost, actually the school or the Act 51 agency, the Road Commission was awarded that. We wrote the grant with the help of North Star Academy, and the Road Commission as the Act 51 agency submitted it, and we were successful. So in 2016, we constructed a pathway along with Storm, along Wright Street down to Venture over to the Township Hall right here. You got the Fire Hall here, and then down to Warner Street. So you can already start to see, there's a couple gaps there, right? And with the tunnel going in right here, and the pathway along the north side exiting the tunnel is actually going to come all the way over to Wright Street and terminate right about there. So this is the segment that I'd like to try to tackle with your consensus in working with the road committee, of course. We need probably the rec committee's blessing, but most importantly, we need the Safe Routes to School blessing along with the North Star Academy. North Star Academy has to initiate it. So based on a phone call today that I had with representatives from Safe Routes to School, they are going to reach out to North Star Academy to see if they're interested in the process. And don't worry, I'll get to the dollars and cents of this in a minute because I can see your wheels turning. But I've got good news for you on that. So this is a segment that we identified a while back, at least at the road committee level. This was another segment. However, in talking with the Safe Routes to School folks, they indicated that we would have to demonstrate that this could be a potential direct route, or anything that we fund with Safe Routes to School dollars would have to be a direct route from a neighborhood. Okay, so what we're targeting is the subdivisions down south here, Bishop Woods, Oak Hill Estates, etc. So we think that that's a viable project. The Safe Routes folks today on the phone thought that that was a viable project. And so initially when I put this map together over the weekend, I thought, well, let's include this portion along the highway, and then let's get this portion in here too. But it looks like this over may not qualify. So this was a planning map that we submitted in 2016 showing basically a 1 mile radius, how everything was kind of interconnected, future land use that we're looking at, and existing residential neighborhoods that could potentially utilize this. So we had all of this in the initial planning for the 2016 project, but we were only successful with this portion due to budget constraints and basically eligibility. We weren't able to demonstrate that. As of 2019, we'll have a pathway here, and we can tie this into the existing pathway for the school, but now we can't. I'll show you some drone footage that I took over the weekend, but essentially this is the Target Walmart intersection along with the new Riverside dealership. And you can see that there's pathways. Here's the tunnel, here's the pathway. There's a signalized crosswalk here, signalized crosswalk here. So you're starting to see that this connectivity can happen over time. And we have to do it in segments because we just don't have the money to do it all at once. So here's, Walmart, Target. This would be due west going that way, and there's the new dealership. So you can start to see that this is about, getting close to halfway done anyway on the north side. And you can see the pathway there, and you can see the pathway here. So they'll tie all that in once the rest of the asphalt is put in. But it's pretty neat to see these things come to fruition after working on them for a very long time. Now this photo is just the same photo, essentially orientated to the north. And you can see that pathway now going in front of Target's store. Separated pathway, by the way. And now, you know, everything looks so big on a map, but when you look at it from this perspective, this kind of bird's eye, drone eye, you can start to see that, you know, these areas to connect, they're not that far. They're not really that far. So this, like I said, this pathway here is going to end up terminating right here. And then North Star Academy is just right up in this area here. And then this is the tunnel. We have about half of it constructed. And once they finish the asphalt, I suspect they'll be jumping to the other side of the road and finishing that. But it's really neat to see those projects kind of come to fruition. So, as I stated before, the Safe Routes to School program is a subsidiary of the TAP program. And as such, still, we would not be required to provide any match because MDOT has been covering the match through toll fees that they've been collecting. So Safe Routes projects, the local match is covered by the toll fees that are collected in other parts of Michigan. So that's a benefit. I was going to expand this discussion tonight into the rest of the 2021 project, but I need some more time to prepare that for you because I need to reach out to MDOT folks and find out, you know, where the TAP funding is at and if there's any real benefit to us applying for a separate project that would involve, you know, they're going to be doing curb work, but can we consolidate driveways? Can we install a pathway on the north side? Can we do the lighting that we want to do? And how do we make that financially viable? Of course, we have expanded the DDA, and the DDA, I believe 1 mil, according to our assessor, right now the 1 mil generates about $170,000 a year. And if we were to do a 1 mil for 5 years, hypothetically, that's a pretty good chunk of money to be able to utilize. If you remember, the $2.5 million TAP grant that we were successful with the tunnel required a $500,000 match. So that's an 80-20. And even more so now, TAP grants, because they've been so popular, have become more competitive. And now they're indicating that a match may need to be in the 35 to 40% range to be competitive. So that's the kind of match you'd be having to provide. And that's what I need some more time in digging up some answers for you on. But I would like to get to that because with the 2021 project, it's really important to be planning for that right now. MDOT's going to be getting into design fairly quickly. And if you remember, when we were successful with the TAP grant for the tunnel, we were actually awarded a year ahead of the project. So in my view, I would like to, if we are going to move forward in that direction and utilize you know, potential DDA funds or a TAP grant that would require a match, I'd like to have all that kind of lined up for you before I came to present it to you. Nothing has changed as far as the improvements that I think we want to make. I think the business community and the joint meetings we've had with the Township Business Association, I think that the things that we're after, again, lighting, better pedestrian connectivity, better ingress and egress to businesses, and aesthetics are all the same. I don't think those things have changed. So it's just a matter of what can we put together in a timely manner that would be competitive and successful and require as minimal impact to the residents of the community as possible, but to get the most bang for our buck. I will say this though, the amount of investment in this project's about $10 million. The amount of investment that's that we're seeing in our community, in the corridor, it could be going anywhere in Michigan, but it's right here in Marquette Township. In 2021, there's going to be more investment in that area. In my view, it's a once-in-a-generational thing. We should try to convert this rural cross-section of roadway to a more urban cross-section of roadway. And I believe that we can do that through the grant process. and through the DDA. And I'll speak candidly in saying that I think that if we were forthright in educating the business community and providing them with a conceptual rendering of what something might look like, and then we could take that out to the businesses and demonstrate if the township board elected to levy a millage for the DDA to make these improvements within the DDA, and they were in lockstep with the very improvements that the business community wanted anyway, I feel that we could be successful with that. So that's my spiel, but tonight I'm looking for you to provide me some liberty to reach out, continue to have talks with the North Star Academy and with the Safe Routes to School program to try to see if we can piggyback that segment, at least that segment, into the 2021 highway project. Again, there's benefits to that because there'll be people mobilized already. We might get better bids and a lower price, which is good for the state because then they can spend more money elsewhere in the state. But we know for sure that when construction projects are going on, there's lower costs if you can tie things together. And we certainly are able to demonstrate now that there is connectivity to another 3% of our population, essentially south of the highway, in a safe way to get to North Star Academy. We use North Star Academy, and I always say it's a Safe Routes to School pathway per the grant program, but from a planner's perspective, it's also just the extension of our non-motorized pathway. And I think that's something we should look at too. So I look at it from two different points. There'll be a lot of, I don't know if you remember or not, but during the initial phase of the Safe Routes to School grant application, there's a lot of groundwork that has to happen. They have to come out and do some surveys, some counting. They inquire with people about, how do you get to school? They ask the students, do you get dropped off or do you bike? Where do you bike from? All that grunt work kind of needs to be done before you put in the final application for the federal grant. But because we've had success and we've built what we said we were going to build, and we've educated as a component of the award as well. North Star Academy had some educational programming that they were required to provide to the students to let them know, hey, you have a pathway here, you can get here. Here's how you use the intersections. Here's how you use the push button for the solar powered signage that's out there. I think we could be successful, and we can certainly demonstrate this. And from my discussion today with the Safe Routes to School representatives, they thought this would be a very competitive project.
Wow. Questions for Jason? I'm wondering about we haven't had a lot of luck having the intersections and stuff plowed in the wintertime so people can actually use the paths that are there and get up to the buttons to push them. Is that something we have to do, consider, get better at?
The Safe Routes to School route that we have now, let me back up to the actual picture. This is a planning map. So, yes, we currently use the John Deere tractor and perhaps a new implement, or at least a new blower, I think, this year, to tackle that. And it would be a responsibility of ours to maintain that. Do I think it's worth
Maintain
it?
as far as cleaning it, right?
Right. Do I think it's worth it? I do. And I've had some, I don't know if you've noticed it, but I have. There's a lot more people walking and biking in our community. Not just the city, but also in our community, whether it be to Walmart or Target or just through the community along the highway. There's a lot more activity that way, and I think that we would be doing a good service to residents and visitors by taking advantage of these zero match grant opportunities to expand our, I mean, if the only cost, and this is me speaking, if the only cost is maintaining the infrastructure and the infrastructure is free, I don't see a reason not to do it, but that's me.
John?
Jason, your request to the board tonight is to get licensed to go ahead with planning so that you can make the contacts that are necessary, so that you can provide a concise plan back to the board eventually.
Yes, sir.
And you need to get, if I understand it correctly, the opportunity is ours to put together these thoughts and make sure that we have a plan that'll work. And if the only handicap that I see right now is, I think we're working into, if this concept was to be accepted, we would have greater investment in maintenance. But I tend to agree with Jason that whatever that is, it's like the tunnel. The tunnel was approved by majority of the board, and then the state said, do you believe that you will maintain this? And we made a commitment, the board did, that we would maintain it. I think that would happen again, perhaps, if this was to be approved. The final one. I don't see a problem with that. I agree that that kind of an investment is one that we should look at with a smile. Of course it's going to be expensive to maintain this new stretch. But I think that what Jason has offered is simply give me license to put a plan together and come back to you. I'll give you that.
Thanks. Yeah, we've formulated some wonderful relationships with local and state regulatory agencies. They see a plan that we have. It's beginning, and I think that if we keep the momentum going and continue to demonstrate that we're continuing to work on this plan, I think that we're going to be successful.
Dan?
Well, we all know that the John Deere isn't going to be very effective in keeping that sidewalk and stuff open. I would think we would need to get something a little bit larger than that, which I know is in the talking stages anyhow.
Mm-hmm.
What my question is if you're talking from the tunnel and going across, I mean, kids aren't going to be walking on the snowmobile trail to get through the tunnel in the wintertime. So do you really feel that that needs to be cleared off for them to walk on to get to school?
Well, no, and it won't. That's a good question. Different times of the year, it'll be utilized in different ways, no doubt. But the snowmobile trail will terminate or continue to the north immediately upon exit of the tunnel. And anything east of that would be non-motorized, regardless of the time of year. So could somebody ride their snow bike under the tunnel from Bishop Woods? They could. In fact, I just ordered a bike. It should be here tomorrow. That's why I'm off tomorrow, because I have to sign for it. But I went to the dark side and ordered a fat bike, which is an e-bike.
We got to talk.
Yeah, so my issue is I would like to commute more. And whenever I go home at lunch on a hot day, I'm going to be a bag of sweat. And so this bike will allow me to commute, and I can ease my way home at lunch, and then I can sweat it out on the way home after work. But the intention is to utilize this infrastructure that we've all been helping create. And I can safely go from my home on North Woods Road, down the Iron Ore Heritage Trail, to the tunnel, under the tunnel, come out, have a pathway going all the way to here, and there's a pretty wide right-of-way. In fact, I know from the road commission's discussions that this right-of-way is ready to go and plenty wide enough for a 10-foot pathway to be installed on the west side of it. Or up to 10. I think we only need 6 to be in compliance with the ADA. So 2 bikes could go by each other, or 2 wheelchairs, if you will. But yeah, I intend to utilize the infrastructure, or I can come down to Commerce and go across that segment. But that's another segment that maybe we can work on at a local level. But you start to see that there's a lot of connectivity available, especially if you look back at, where's something with Ontario on it, but Ontario is being worked on from south to north. And as that federal money comes in, because that's a Fed aid road, and the road commission has the funds and the means to do so, they're going to continue that pathway on the east side as they head north on Ontario. So now we're starting to have some real connectivity. You got a 1 square mile area. And if we just went on Fair, which on the east half of Fair from Ontario, we do have a wide shoulder there that is considered to be bikeable. So in just a few, let's say 5 years from now, we're successful with the Safe Routes to School project. We're successful in maybe securing a TAP grant to provide a pathway along, one side of the highway or the other. We've really done some great service to the community by expanding our network when and where feasible. And I think that the when and where feasible is right now because we have other projects that are in the works. And it's much easier, as with anything, including our road projects, it's way easier to do this kind of stuff at the time of construction rather than to go back and have to do it later. You're going to pay almost double what you would to get it done later. So the Safe Routes, to me, the Safe Routes to School project grant application should be a slam dunk, but I do have concern about maintenance, and I hope that during your budget cycle this year, you will consider perhaps a more adequate piece of machinery to maintain that. They can be expensive, but there's also, 2 very good companies in town that handle those types of machines, or maybe it's something else. But I just think for the infrastructure that's put in place to have a piece of equipment that you'd probably have on hand anyway, to maintain it is a fairly small price to pay for what you're doing on a grand scheme.
Dave?
First, I agree with John, I would support the board's green light to move ahead with the planning stages of this. But in addition to that, I think we've got enough experience with maintaining the safe routes to school that we have, that we should be able to tack some dollars on that. It breaks down per foot, so we should be able to come up with some kind of ballpark, and certainly it's not going to be in concrete, but some kind of a ballpark on what it costs to maintain what we have, because we've got the history, and also what it costs to add this piece to it, what it's going to take extra. Just we've got the experience now. We didn't have that when we started out taking care of that Safe Routes to School pathway. We know what kind of equipment it's going to take. We should be able to put some numbers. I know that's not necessarily your ballpark, but that would be the manager's ballpark to put some numbers to that, because he knows what kind of dollars are being spent in manpower and in equipment.
We also maintain Warner and Ontario, as well as, I believe, across Commerce. So maybe there's some opportunity to work with the road commission on.
They actually all go all the way down to Lost Creek, right? When they're cleaning them. And I think it costs X number of dollars to do that every year. So if you divide it by the number of feet you're doing and add the number of feet you're going to add, you should be able to have a ballpark on what it's going to cost to. So, and because the only thing for the board to consider on this, I mean, it's pretty much a no-brainer on the grant part. It's not going to cost you anything. I think the only involvement is they don't pay for engineering, correct?
Right. But that's I think Jim Iwaniki and the road commission covered that last time.
They did last time.
And that was
something that would have to be
gift of
addressed
theirs.
as the engineering side of that. But the only thing that the township would have to ponder is the maintenance costs, the additional maintenance costs. And regardless how that comes out, I think it's a good idea to move forward with it because it's just improving our township and it's lining everything up with our complete streets and everything else that we've been professing for 5-6 years now. But I don't think it would be that difficult to add some numbers in there so that we know when we're given, when we see you come back here with all this is what it's, where we're at and this is what we propose to do, it wouldn't be that difficult to throw in this is what maintenance is going to cost additionally. And that would be helpful from my perspective on the board is to know what impact we're going to have on the budget.
You look at the, at the maintenance, yes, it costs money. What's, like Jason said earlier, and I know it's happening, more and more people are out there, they're walking, they're biking and stuff like that. What's the cost of one accident for a kid to force them out on the road? How much would you pay for that? You know, so we have to find a way of economically cleaning those paths, get the people off the roads. And there's a lot we can do at that whole end. After you get this one done, Jason, we should look at from Venture to Wright Street on Commerce, because there's a subdivision down there with all them apartments, the kids are walking, and it's very dangerous to see these people on the side of the road. And I don't know if we could get that to tie into to walking to school or not, but it's something that we could look at in the future. But I'm all for this project. I just think it's a great project, and I think we have to belly up to the table and pay for what we can, take care of our kids and that, and the people out there. Then in wintertime, it's not the regular bikes, you got your wide tire bikes, they're out there in the wintertime. So I think I'll give up pickleball and start biking.
It's good for
But I'm all for it.
Good for your rehab.
I think it's a great thing to do. I
Yeah.
think it's a great thing to do.
Yeah, the DDA component of this is very exciting to me, especially having been a liaison to the business community since I basically started in 2011. You know, a lot of these improvements, we're trying to figure out, well, how is this ever going to happen? And then MDOT contacts us and lets us know that they have these projects going on. And then the TAP program kind of fell in my lap. And, oh, well, there's a whole grant process for these types of developments. And now, with this expanded DDA, and not to sound greedy, because I realize that the business community, they pay their bills and they have already taxes that they pay. But I think through the educational process and a conceptual planning process that the DDA would be supportive of making these improvements, because I think in the end it improves the experience for the customer. And that's the main, as my parents were business owners, you know, and I know that in the end it's all about the customer's experience. So if you can make any kind of safety improvements, and maybe, you know, you pay a little bit more a year, I suspect that those business owners would be supportive of that. But the township board, you have a unique ability to levy up to 2 mills without a vote of the people. So it's something to ponder, and there's a lot that could be done with even just 1 mill for an extended period of time, 3 to 5 years. That's over $500,000. So if you look at the timing of everything, I think we've put all the pieces in place to have some effective projects, and I'm looking forward to your continued forward thinking and leadership in that capacity.
Well, we do have an agenda item asking if we want to consider this, so we can kind of jump ahead if you want, and if somebody wants to make a motion rather than just consensus. We've kind of started, or we're going to try to start putting motions on our agenda items, so if for the future, just a recommended motion in italics or something.
Okay.
So the board kind of knows what the question is.
Sure.
Kind of like you do in your report, your little,
For the planning commission.
yeah, staff report, thanks. So if somebody wants to say something?
John did.
Did you want to make yours a motion, John?
Yeah, I'll be
To
glad to.
direct
If, I thought, I move that the board authorize our planner to
Can we change-
develop.
Can we change planner to staff?
Pardon?
Staff.
Okay. Revise that to staff. Okay. Authorize the staff to develop a plan that coincides with the safe routes to schools information we have.
Do you need anything more than that, Jason?
No, thank you.
I'll second that then.
Any other, whoever you are, Ernie?
That will also include the financial information too.
Absolutely.
Yes, Dave.
We touched briefly on the, moving forward with the, something with the DDA and start coordinating efforts with them on the 2021 project from MDOT. Do you want to include that in there as far as the planning goes?
DDA
gotta
meets
come
again
back
in
with a-
October.
With something that we could again approve it.
Yes, appreciate your question. I would appreciate having a little bit more time with that and being better prepared before I come to talk about it. Thank you, though.
Anything else? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we can kind of mark off 9A. We've done that. But let's backtrack to community linkage. Does anybody have anything they want to share they're hearing in the community? We need to look at or worry about or talk about? Anything comes up, let me know. How about some quick committee reports, Dave?
Yeah, there's not a lot, but I can update that fairly quickly. The August 28th Planning Commission meeting, first we canceled the September 11th Planning Commission meeting due to agenda items or the lack thereof. We did approve a access driveway special use permit public hearing for Fox Subaru for September 25th. And just a refresher, the proposed access driveway is adjacent to zoned rural residential. And as you may recall, the previously approved special use permit for that access was revoked by Planning Commission action as a result of numerous special use conditions violations. And then the Planning Commission approved a public hearing for land use of 875 Brookton Road, which is, the applicant was Northland Enterprises LLC, and that's scheduled for September 25th, and that's required because the proposed land is adjacent to rural residential property. And that is going to be 25th. Is Northland Basements is the applicant, and he's going to have his, right now he's in Ironwood, and he wants to put a branch up here, but it's a trades store, and they'll have some material stored outside, and we're working on a special use permit for that. Or not a special use permit, approving his plan based on the public hearing.
I saw that. Where is it?
It's in the old carpet specialist
Okay.
store. And then the road committee, for tonight's road committee will be updated at the next meeting. And from the rec committee, the recreation plan was approved and recommended to the planning commission, where it'll be included as an appendix to the master plan. And that's it.
All right, and we've got committee reports that are included because they're draft, and we've already covered 9A. So we have 9B, which is Roger. The information you did get, a sample with some corrections on it from the Cayman on Trail Network. regarding a non-exclusive trail license agreement with us in our wellhead protection area and down in the South Trails. So Roger did put it together. We haven't had a chance to look at it. He dropped it off tonight. And I'll segue to you, and you can kind of explain what you were telling me, where we stand with this.
Basically, you've seen this before, except for a couple of items of red print in it. I had met with the NTN folks, along with the manager, a couple of weeks ago. They voiced about a half a dozen concerns with the version that the board authorized me to present to them. We had a fairly long dialogue explaining our respective positions. There were a couple of the issues that they raised that we indicated are simply non-negotiable. One of them is in paragraph 8, for example. They expressed some consternation about the gasoline limits on equipment that might be utilized to prepare the trail and so forth. In any event, and that's not our regulation, that's something that's governed by, at both the federal and state level, of what type of fueling can take place in the wellhead protection area and so forth. In any event, some of the other things we had indicated that we were willing to discuss at least. So I'll go through them very briefly. Number 9 is the first piece of red ink that you have. The terminology positive control had been used. That was at the recommendation of the manager and the zoning administrator, because I had circulated this to multiple staff persons for input on what type of things would we like to see in a trail license agreement. That terminology is not familiar to everybody, so we just changed it to basically say that the dogs have to be properly leashed and under the control of the owner or person having custody. And that's, so it's a more user-friendly terminology to anyone reading the proposed agreement.
So that would include, Roger, any electronic devices, if they had a collar on their dog or something, as long as it's under control by the handler. It doesn't have to be leashed, is what you're saying.
Well, more along what I was saying is you can have a 90-pound person with a 150-pound dog on a leash and still not have that animal in control. The leash, there is a leash law in Michigan, a state statute that essentially requires your dog to be leashed. So how, and that statute was written a whole lot of years ago, long before electronic collars. So that's a little bit of an unknown factor of how that plays in if really challenged. So that's why it's worded as it's worded, because right now, whether we say so or not, there is a leash law in Michigan. Does everybody enforce that? Is it easy to enforce? No and no, but it's out there. And basically what we were asking is they're not going to have a person on the trail at all times, at all hours and every day of the week to enforce that, but they are going to agree to post signage. That includes that they will comply with A, B, and C, but they need to know what the A, B, and C are. It would also, of course, have the language that nobody challenged or even discussed at much length, that it would require any pet owners to clean up after the pets on the trails. The next change in paragraph 11 is also relatively minor. It was pointed out that that could be read in more than one way, as far as the township giving 30-day notice if they need to move a trail because we're going to, let's say, erect a new building or reroute a road through our property, or many other types of possible scenarios. And what the intent was is if we learn that in the winter, they may not have the opportunity to move it immediately. So the language, as soon as weather and conditions permit, was added. We would still give our notice as soon as we learn of the need to do so. But it's fairly minor change and probably a reasonable one. The next one, where there's a minor change, is in paragraph 16. Paragraph 16 essentially says that even though we're granting the right to use our property for trails, it's entirely at the expense of the NTN folks, that we're not going to provide labor, materials, equipment, supplies, or anything else to accomplish that. And it was pointed out that occasionally there might be cases where there are grants or a collaborative type of application for funds, and that has been done in the past, and apparently there are some other ones on the horizon where it might be beneficial for both parties to work together to attempt to gain funds. So this language is just saying, except as may otherwise be agreed in writing for purposes of grant applications or other collaborative purposes. It's leaving that open, and it's still saying that for that to occur, there would need to be a separate writing saying we would agree to that. But that's leaving that open so that some granting agency doesn't look at the agreement and say, well, you're not eligible because you don't have terminology to that effect. The final revision was in paragraph 23. Those numbers in the insurance limits coincide with what the NTN representatives indicated their current coverage is. I indicated I thought that that was a bit low, but they got back to me and also said that they've checked with agents and other trail insurers that write policies for this type of an entity across the United States, and that's fairly common. So accepting that at face value, I haven't done any independent research to determine if that's accurate or not. At least for purposes of further discussion, I've modified those limits to reflect what their current coverage is. The township would be named as an additional named insured, but of course we would be covered as well, even if there was a claim, by our own coverage. And to a large degree, both entities are exempt under state statute from liability, except in cases of gross negligence or willful and wanton misconduct, because there is no, at least by the township, there's no fee being charged, so there's governmental immunity that the township has that prevents a person, even if they're injured by a condition on the trail, they're prevented from filing suit against the township at least. Again, that's a blanket statement, and there are exceptions to that, but the exceptions are, the immunity is broad and the exceptions are fairly narrow. So that makes the insurance important, but not as important for some other type of liability concerns. So for purposes of discussion, that's just accepting the amounts of the current coverage. Everything else is identical to what had been presented to the board in the past. I am not requesting approval of the form even at this point, but perhaps a consensus or authorization to just present this document back to NTN to see what their comments or input might be at this point. And then if it looks satisfactory, it would once again come back to this board for a final approval, or possibly with any other revisions they might request.
Randy?
I move to send this draft agreement back to the NTN for, what is it, just for their, what is it, their discussion, basically, back for their approval.
The review, I suppose.
Their review, yeah.
We have support. Questions, comments? We're good? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, we'll send it back to them and see what they say. And if we happen to have something, let me know for the 17th agenda, if it happens to come back.
I will.
I'll put it on as a question mark so I can check with you again. Okay, public comment? You want to give us any comment while you're here? Nope, okay, thanks. We lost our
Bye.
public. Any announcements anybody's got to share? Nope, we don't have a manager's report, because he's not here, he's fishing. Yes, sir.
I think this is the appropriate spot to throw in some questions for the manager. I'm sure you'll get them, right?
Absolutely. I can write them down, or we'll record them.
My questions are, and it has a lot to do with the budget process that we're up and coming, and it occurs to me that there's probably a need, in my opinion, for a CIP request for the ice rink roof. And the reason I think we need that is because for a couple of years, we've been collecting money for it, but we don't really know where that money is. There's no accountability for that money, and one of the things about the CIP report is in the annual review of the CIPs, it would show the money that has been collected to date. Not that any has to be budgeted for it, but it would just be the place to summarize the CIP status or the ice rink roof status, because I know tomorrow, I think, we're getting some money from one of the local businesses, and there's no place to earmark where that came from or how much is actually in the ice rink roof.
I'm sure Lois can give us the total, but.
Well, I'm sure she can, but
It has its own
if it,
line item count, so.
right.
You will want to have just the roof part pulled out so that we know how much has been collected so far.
Yeah, I would think the best way to keep track of that forever, you remember all the problems we had when, with some of the other CIPs that were going into a general fund and money was being moved around as we needed it. Again, the best way to keep track of that is if the ice rink roof was a CIP request that was approved, and then the money is accounted for in there, and it's easy to see where that money is and how much has been collected.
Okay,
Another question is, I haven't seen anything on the approved CIP that was budgeted this year for the audiovisual equipment. And it's coming up on the end of the year. I just wonder why we haven't moved forward with that,
we're getting it.
with actually having it done. It's already been budgeted, the money's there, the CIP was approved. I'm just wondering where it's at.
Okay.
And then just an update on the generator for the township hall.
Sounds good. Anybody else have anything for him? Ernie?
I'm going through the preliminary budget. I'm going through and looking at the ambulance. I could see where the revenue came in, but I could not break down the expenses for the ambulance anywhere. So it's something that I may have to sit down with Lois and see if there's a spot in there that can, they have an accumulation somewhere to tell me how much the expenses are for the ambulance. That,
Yeah, it's not split out separately.
no.
Because it could be a multitude of things. Okay, let me add that to that.
On that same note, before we did talk about the ambulance in the past, before we moved forward with that, I did ask Lois about that, and she can break you out a sheet with the revenue and expenses for, I think, since the inception of 2017 to now. See where we're
It'd be a
at.
good thing to have in the packet with the rest
Yeah.
of the financials every month.
Yeah, and she could generate that report, I'm sure, so.
Yeah. Okay. It's a good one.
I'm just concerned, because that's what my major concern, and some people have already asked.
Yeah.
Are we losing money or making money? And I said, I'm only concerned if they break even, that's it. And where there also comes up for the safety of the people in the township, and that. So if it costs us a few dollars, I'm looking at safety of the people and that.
It's not, we are making money. I can't tell you how much. I mean, I don't know how much.
But that's not my concern.
Right.
I'm not worried about
Yeah,
that.
so we're beyond the break-even part. We're okay. I just don't know exactly. Yes, Dave?
As long as we're talking about CIP requests, I'm curious where they're at. I know they were supposed to be turned in, and I know was comment at the last meeting about they didn't think there was gonna be any, but that didn't mean there wasn't any. And I'm just wondering if the board has made a decision, is the board gonna deal with that on their own, or are they gonna deal with them through the planning commission first? So I guess as the planning commission rep, I'm wondering when the planning commission could expect to see them.
That would come, depending on what the department is, it'd come to the planning commission first. We just kind of get them as part of the budget. So we can check with Jason.
Okay.
And what was I just thinking about that?
The reason I'm adding it in here is CIP's request originate through the manager first place anyway, right? Before they go anyplace.
Well, yeah, coming through the department, they'd filter through him, yeah.
So it's another question for him.
Okay.
He's gonna be sorry he took vacation.
I'm gonna put, one of the things for future agenda item is going to be, to schedule budget work sessions. I was gonna do that now, but it doesn't make sense if Randy's not here, so he can check his schedule. So that'll be on the 17th to do, budget work sessions. So he knows that already, and I would think that the CIP is gonna be part of that, so he'll probably have it for us.
My question's more of a prompter than anything else.
That's good. You don't want to forget stuff, so that's okay.
We have the new employee at our next meeting?
He's supposed to be, that would be the 17th,
Yeah.
yes. He is supposed to be here to introduce himself, or Randy to introduce him. Yes.
It's just staff.
Okay.
Lynn,
Yes, Pete.
I got a question. Roger's here. All the things, what's going on with this vaping thing, is vaping gonna come under no smoking and, like cigarettes? Is vaping going to be included in that, or is there a difference, Roger?
It is right now, yeah, that's a Roger question, but for me, business-wise, and for all the restaurants and the stores and the bars and everything, it's considered smoking.
I figured that, but I just want to, you get in some kind of a struggle here.
That's a hot topic of discussion, and there may be some legislation, some regulations coming down on that. That's something that we need to keep monitoring.
Okay.
That's the other thing I was gonna say, that we were talking about planning commission. Oh, shoot. Oh, the ordinances. I had asked Jason whether or not we had anything final that he was gonna present, or you or somebody on the marijuana ordinance, period. And he said he'd get back to me. So,
They're planning on the initial copy of the definitions for consideration at the September 25th meeting. For the planning commission to look at them, yeah. But that is, I'm sure that's not gonna be the final version at all. That's just the initial draft.
yeah, that's pushing it, because we might have to have something by October.
What do you mean?
October 1st.
Yeah, they're
We
saying
don't,
that.
we've already opted out. We don't have to have anything.
Yeah, but if they go ahead and we're not ready,
Yeah.
that's where the problem comes in.
Explain the problem. We keep talking about that, and I don't understand the problem.
The problem is they can decide for us what we're gonna do. When we decide to opt in, it could already be in place. The legislation
No.
could already be in place.
Are you talking about the state?
Yeah,
They haven't done anything yet.
right.
Yeah.
They could decide. In fact, Kim Benzie told me that the last time I talked to her. She said, if you don't have something in place, you need to get it established. Because something could happen from the state October 1st. In which case, they will trump us. If we opt back in, we have to follow what they're doing. Or at least go through the whole changing the ordinance process. If we have specific things we want to do, she suggested we do it before they make their announcement.
Is that what you understand, Roger?
Well, the bigger concern at this point.
Is your microphone on, Roger? Make sure it's on.
The bigger concern at this point is the opt-out. At this point, you have opted out. So you can have a whole lot of things forced upon you if you just do nothing. but you've done the opting out at this point. And if new regulations come down from the state, then we'll have to comply with those regulations no matter what. I can talk to Representative Cambenzi and see exactly what she had in mind, but the big push was to have something in place that you already have in place of opting out for the time being.
Right. But if we
And
have
that's done.
specific things that we want to address, the way I understood what she was saying was it should happen before the state announces, and if they've said that October 1st is gonna be, it could be December 1st, who knows, but the October 1st date was the last one I heard too. It's kind of a moot point, because we don't have anything right now that we've even seen, so I'm just worried about
Right,
that.
and you'll have to decide, for example, how many of each type of facility you want to have, where you want them, what zoning districts, and that type of thing, but again, I can talk to Representative Cambenzi and see what she had in mind there exactly, but my understanding is the huge decision has been made
Right.
already.
That we
That was
opted
the really important one. And if new legislation were to come down, for example, well, we're gonna have to comply with that legislation no matter what, so.
And maybe that's fine, maybe whatever happens is okay, but we're okay with it. That's all I said was if we had specific things we wanted to try to address, this is the time to get them in there.
But there are other things that are coming down there. It's a marijuana events organizer, temporary marijuana events, social clubs. I mean, there's so many things coming that we should really take a look at. City of Marquette's got one tomorrow at 5:30, but they're looking at it, and so I'd like to find out where we are. I know where we are, but I mean, as far as
Where we can go.
where we can go and protect ourselves.
All of those things are in the regulations that were already adopted a couple months ago, as well as in the state legislation. There are a whole host, and I sent a detailed memorandum to the zoning administrator and the planning commission that in a cursory, for how long it is, it's almost antithetical to say that it's cursory, but it is because it's a complicated topic. But there are a whole host of different types of facilities, and the temporary venues and the entertainment things and so forth are all addressed in either the legislation or the regulations that have already been adopted. And now granted, the regulations that were adopted a couple of months ago are labeled as temporary regulations because the state wanted to get something in place, but nonetheless, they are very comprehensive.
But we have right now the right to decide how many we want. We can say they have to be 300 feet away from a school or something, or a church or something. You know, there's some option that we can make now if it does come through, so. I just want someone to look at it.
And I guess that's my point, is we've opted out, and regardless of when you opt in, if you decide to opt in on some schedule 2 years from now, you're gonna have to meet whatever guidelines the state has handed down. You're gonna have to make your decision on what portions you're gonna opt in on based on the state regulations, whatever they are. So, once the definitions are done and we move on to the more details about where you wanna locate them and how many of what type you want, that's gonna have to be based on the current state regulations anyway. Because you can make them more restrictive, but you can't make them less restrictive. So that's the process. I don't think we should get in a panic about this, because we're better off to take our time, and if we're done by the end of this year and actually have a document that goes along with the state's final version. The last thing I'd hate to see is we put together something that goes with their emergency rules that they put through, and then we'll get that all said and done, and they'll come out with their final version, and it means we gotta go back to the drawing board and do ours over again. I just think we're better off taking a more cautious approach to it and wait until they make their decision on the things that we can't do anything about.
Well, they all say don't do that, so. A lot of for
Yes,
whatever
John.
reason. I'm sorry.
We're kind of both, I saw you first, but
Okay. Just one more time, I want to urge recognition of the distinction that needs to be made on this subject. Medicinal and recreational should not be tied together in a tie-bar fashion on any rulings that we have.
Ernie? Did you forget?
No, is John done?
I think so.
Yes, thank you.
You talk about vaping and smoking, everything else. Northern has got a, whatever they did, they have 5 things listed that vaping and smoking and tobacco use, everything, there's 5 of them. It's on all the doors, anywhere, and in there. So anytime you go in any of the buildings, it's on the door, and they define it very well.
That it's not allowed?
It's not allowed at all on campus and that anywhere. And that too, so.
And
So that means no matter where you are, if it's on campus, it's not allowed, period.
Okay.
I forgot, I picked up one brochure, I should have picked up enough for the whole board, and I didn't.
Okay, should we review motions?
Not many tonight, but first motion was consent agenda approved. Second motion was approval of the agenda as presented. Third motion was, under the board education, we moved to direct staff to develop and plan coinciding with the safe routes to school program, and that was approved. Fourth motion was to send the NTN license back, or the draft NTN license back to them for review. And that was approved.
Okay. So for future agenda, we will have our annual library update next meeting. We will have a budget work session scheduling, so bring your calendars. I would like to ask, and I'm going to put it on the next agenda, I've had a recent request by the Marquette County Conservation District for another letter of support for a different project for a grant application that they're doing. And we missed the deadline because she told me like 2 days before it was done. And so I worked with Roger to try to see if I could use some of our past letters. And even by the time we did that, it was still too late, and she apologized. So I asked him if we could put together just a blanket letter that says, yes, we support these kinds of things, that I could even just send to you, and if you can, you know, or Randy could and get a consensus and send it out, or these kinds of grant support. And he said, that's fine, we can do that. So I'm gonna put that discussion on the next agenda. Go ahead.
I wonder why the onus of last minute work falls on the board when it actually should fall on the person that wrote the grant. Maybe they need to have it to us a little bit earlier.
Yeah, this is the third person in that office who's tried, we've done 2 grant supports already. This is a different person, whether she's a replacement or another employee, I don't know, but they need to get their act together.
And I guess all I'm saying is if you want to put together a boilerplate support of a grant, fine, but I still think it needs to come toward the board for
Yeah.
approval before it gets sent out.
Yeah, but at least it would already be constructed and everything, and it would be something we agree to, the letter. And then all we have to do is fill in the blank of whatever the project is, but you would know what the project is, obviously. But rather than to try to construct a letter and have it all done in their time frame. And I told her, because she said something about the meetings, I said, just put it on your calendar with the 1st and 3rd, Tuesday. So, figure that out. So anyway, we can talk about it next time. And then Mr. Zenti's request, and then the NTN license if that comes back. So far, that's what we've got for the next meeting. And I already said that. If there's anything else, something comes up, let me know. Otherwise, I'm sure Randy will have some stuff too to talk about. So any board member comment? Anything anybody wants to share? Gosh. Gosh, a quiet group tonight. Jason wore you out.
A move to adjourn.
Support.
Finally. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?